this guy that I worked with, who I only kind of loosely knew, he comes up to me and then he said that he and his wife were saving money so that they could retire 10 years from that point when they were 40. And my immediate thought was like, you're high. You know what I mean? Like, nobody retires when they're 40. You retire at age 65 when you've got $5 to $10 million in the bank, right? So he kind of taught me a little bit about financial independence. And that was a life-changing conversation. So, it's interesting because I actually present, somewhat regularly in front of people, but it's people that I usually don't know, that I'm not friends with. And so I'm actually more nervous now than I was. So if you see me run out the door, it's just me throwing up. Stay seated and I'll be right back, all right? So in all seriousness, I am super passionate about personal finance, financial literacy, and education, and helping people make good decisions financially. Money is one of those things where, if you get it right, it really improves your life. Your relationships are better, you have more opportunities, you have the ability to walk away from your job or go to a lower paying job. It gives you a lot of freedom and, just opportunities. But on the other side of that, which is where I think most Americans are, is, you're struggling financially. You're stressed out about money. It causes you to, fight with your spouse. You're stuck in a job that you don't like. Maybe you have that golden handcuffs where you're, staying in a job that you don't really like. My hope is that, we in the FI community can help others, who are not necessarily pursuing FI, but just people in general who don't know what they don't know about personal finance, that we can help them, learn some of the basics and also motivate them to make good, positive changes that are going to really impact their life. And I know that a lot of us are already doing that. A lot of us tend to be a little bit extroverted and we tend to be like, hey, let me give you this advice without you asking for it, which is actually a good thing. No. Yeah. Which is actually a good thing. But I also know that there's a good chunk of us who are sort of maybe afraid to talk to people about stuff for a lot of different reasons that we'll go into. And so my hope is that at the end of this presentation, you guys will have a little bit more, confidence and, motivation to have those seemingly uncomfortable conversations with your friends and your family and maybe your colleagues, because, learning about personal finance and some of the basics has a drastic impact on people's lives, even if we don't really realize it. So I know that this title seems like maybe a little ambitious or arrogant, I don't know. But we really can change the world in this community, and we're sort of uniquely suited to do it. So anyway, all that being said, some of the stuff that we're going to talk about, why us? Why is it the duty of, the FIRE community to help the rest of the community learn about this stuff? We'll talk about the impact that we can have, and then overcoming those fears that we have around talking about money, and kind of getting into people's business when they're not asking us to be in their business. And then I'll give you guys some, organizations that you can kind of work with if you want to do more of this stuff. So first we'll talk about why us. So there's a few reasons why this community, I think, is sort of the best community to go out and do these things, to spread, financial literacy and everything. The first is that we have the knowledge and the enthusiasm to help. You guys may not realize it, but you actually know more than certainly most of the US population about the basics of investing, managing debt and things like that, especially real estate investing. But you actually know more than most financial advisors out there. Recently, I've been interviewing some financial advisors because I'm like, I should find out, what I don't know and stuff like that. And I don't want to sound like a jerk or whatever, but it's like some of the stuff they were saying is just not right, So in this community, you guys actually know more than most people out there. Even if you feel like you don't know enough to, give advice. And also you have the enthusiasm to help. The fact that you're at CampFI means that you really enjoy this stuff. And, you have the enthusiasm to basically help people with this stuff. The next is that people, generally speaking, don't make decisions or make changes unless they're prompted by somebody else, And so what I mean by that is, maybe you're a person who is thinking that you should be investing, but you don't know what to invest in. So what do? You do nothing, right? And that's really, really common. We tend to stay the course. And so, you guys in the community can help people make those changes, kind of nudge them a little bit or shove them in the right direction. Okay. Oh, good. All right. And this is the really important thing. So if we don't help, then probably nobody else will. In a perfect world, right, we would learn this from our parents. We would learn about, hey, when you're 18, open a Roth IRA, start contributing, get at least the 401k match, right? Don't live beyond your means and, carry credit card every month. But nobody tells you this stuff. right? Maybe some of you were lucky enough to have parents that like knew all this stuff and told you, or went to a school where they had a financial literacy class, but most people don't have that. So the reality is that if we like in this room don't do these things, then probably nobody else will. And a lot of people out there will, not learn these things until many, many years later, if they ever learn them at all. Okay. So I want to talk about how powerful these conversations can be. So I was in the Navy for about 12 years. I got out about a year and a half ago. And I want to talk to you about a conversation that like literally changed my life. So I was kind of into personal finance already. I was investing a lot of money because, I saw that, my investments were going up and that was really exciting. So I was dumping more and more money into investments. And people knew that I liked talking about that stuff. And when you guys were younger and you were in elementary school, did you ever have field day? Where you go out and play and stuff like that? So we have that in the Navy. Yeah, so we have that in the Navy too, but it's less fun. So field day. So field day in the Navy is where you spend 4 to 8 hours deep cleaning the ship, right? So it's super fun. And we do this every single Friday. It's really great. So there I was in a bilge and I was, scooping up some dirty oil and water, from the bilge and just being miserable like you are. And this guy that I worked with, who I only kind of loosely knew, he comes up to me and, he started talking to me about, well, what do I like to invest in? What's he investing in? And, things like that. And then he said that he and his wife were saving money so that they could retire 10 years from that point when they were 40. And my immediate thought was like, you're high. You know what I mean? Like nobody retires when they're 40. You retire at age 65 when you've got $5 to $10 million in the bank, right? Because that's what I thought, it was. So he kind of taught me a little bit about financial independence and, gave me some blogs to read like Mr. Money Mustache. And that was a life-changing conversation. And this was something that I had not asked for. I wasn't like seeking out this information. I didn't even know it existed. But, he took the time to literally walk over and start talking about this stuff. And I want to talk about, what an impact that this had on me, right? So the first is that I met my wife, Ashley, through the fire community, which is like really cool, right? Because you guys have all met Ashley and you know like how awesome she is, right? So and that's like a really cool thing. Like that's like a huge part of my life. That's a huge part of my life that like would not have happened had this random conversation, not happened. Most of my friends that I like normally socialize with came from this community. People that I met from CampFI or Baughier or, one of the local Choose FI meetups, right? I was able to have the courage to leave my toxic job, right? I was in the Navy. I was making a lot of money. Re-enlistment bonuses were sometimes upwards of 6 figures, right? Plus there's a pension that you can get if you do 20 years. At the time that I had this conversation, I'd served about 8 years. I had 4 more to go. And I was pretty much resigned to the fact that I was going to stay in, for 20 years, continue making that high salary, re-enlistment bonuses, get the pension. And I was really miserable in my job. I hated it. I was stressed out all the time. I was previously married and it was causing problems in our marriage. And, but I thought, okay, the job sucks, but I'm used to it. And I've already done 12 years. What's another 8? Which is a terrible way of thinking about things. You guys that I've worked with before know that I'm like, if you're not happy in your job, find something else right now, So anyway, it gave me the courage to turn down all of that money, and that kind of safety net, and move on from that toxic job. All right. And then going along with that mental health, right? There were a lot of mental health issues that I was not addressing because, I was afraid of getting kicked out of the Navy. I was afraid of and this is really common in the military, you don't address mental health concerns because you're afraid that you're going to be removed from your crew. You're going to cause more work to be piled on other people. You're going to look like you're just like ditching everybody. It's really bad in the military. This is a big problem. And it affected me too. Right. So this is something that I could start addressing because of this random conversation that he had with me. And of course, we all know, learning about fire, right? We have freedom, right? We have the freedom to, move on to employment that we really enjoy or stop working altogether, or pursue, whatever opportunity is. There's a huge amount of freedom to having money and to having a lot of money the fire community tends to have. So that was just a random conversation that I did not ask for. Somebody just kind of in my business, unprompted. So I want to give a few more examples of how these conversations change lives. So Shaquille O'Neal, the basketball player, he famously, signed on with whatever team he was on. He got a $600,000 bonus, and he immediately spent about $500,000 of it on cars. He bought himself the super nice Mercedes, and then his dad wanted one, so he bought one for his dad and then his mom. And it was interesting because this is very common. This is very, very common for sports players. This is why they tend to end up more broke than they started out with, right? So a banker, a family friend of his that was a banker, saw what he was doing, and he said, "Look, you're going to make a lot of money, and you can keep spending like you're spending, but I don't want to see you end up like every other professional sports player." So that really kind of woke him up, right? He had never thought about that before, the fact that the money could turn off. So then he started basically, living on a fraction of what he was making. He said, hey, half goes to taxes, and of the remaining half, you spend half of it, invest half of it. So it got him very interested in investing, building businesses and things like that. And today he's worth over $500 million, which is pretty incredible, right? He's not even making money from basketball anymore. And so that conversation that he didn't ask for, somebody was just in his business, really changed his life. Okay. This is a really cool story. So, about a year and a half ago, I was out in the Navy. I just gotten out, and somebody texted me and from a number I didn't really recognize. And they said, hey, could we hop on Zoom? I want to talk about investments. And I was like, sure. So we hopped on Zoom. It's funny. I didn't mean for that to be funny. It really was. I was like, okay, and so we hopped on Zoom, and I didn't really recognize the kid at the other end. And I said, I apologize. I don't really remember you. Did we surf together on, a ship or something like that? And he said, no. About a year and a half earlier, when we were both in Hawaii, he had just shown up to the island, and he didn't have a car yet. So I gave him and his two buddies a ride to the store, totally random, right? And of course, I'm like in everybody's business, financially. So I said, hey, are you guys thinking about re-enlisting? Because I get really fat re-enlistment bonuses. Are you thinking about re-enlisting? And a couple of them said, yeah. And I said, hey, make sure you take your re-enlistment bonus, max out your TSP for the year, right? The government 401k. The limit was around $20,000, I think. And I said, because that one contribution, is worth over $1 million. You're 19 years old. That's going to be $1 million by the time you're 60, 65. Of course, with inflation, it's not that much, but we all understand, right? But I mean, it's one of those things where, that really appeals to people, right? The idea, I could become a millionaire just with this one action. Let's do it, So what was really cool is that he did that, right? He maxed out his TSP for that year, and then he actually took the rest of the money and he purchased a used car and then put the rest in a brokerage account. He was reaching out to me because it was 2022, the stock market was really frothy, and he wanted to make sure that he shouldn't be doing something different. But anyway, my point is that this random conversation that I had with these three kids, they're 19, 20, these three sailors, that were just in the backseat of my car, had an impact on at least one of them, right? And again, that kid's life, and I'm not like tooting my own horn or whatever, but like his life is going to be changed because at, age 19, he like put that money into his TSP. Okay. So it makes a difference. So my wife's dad, this is another really good example. Back in the 1980s, the TSP, the government 401k rolled out for government workers. Both her parents were federal workers, and her dad said to her mom, hey, you should really do this TSP thing, like investing, grows and, et cetera, et cetera. Again, unprompted. So her mom started investing. And then when Ashley was born and she was a teenager, her mom taught her about investing, right? So when I met Ashley, she's like, oh yeah, I've always maxed out a Roth IRA, because that's what my mom taught me to do, because that's what her dad taught her to do. These conversations really do change lives. Even when people aren't seeking out advice, you really need to like give them the advice unprompted, even though it's uncomfortable. Okay. And let's talk about the ripple effect, right? So you're not just helping the people that you're helping when you do this, right? You're helping every person that they go on and help after that, right? So in the previous examples, we talked about Shaq, right? He to this day continues to teach and mentor other professional basketball players to make sure that they are on a better track financially, to make sure that they don't spend all of their money on sort of, consumeristy things. That's having a huge impact on, that community that's important to him. That sailor that I helped, right? He's teaching his shipmates, about these things and making sure that when they get these bonuses or they get these pay raises, that they're investing a portion of it. That's going to have a ripple effect on them. And then, like I said before, right? Ashley's dad told Ashley's mom about this whole investing thing. And then Ashley's mom taught Ashley about this. And Ashley teaches other people about it now. It's this ripple effect. Imagine if just one of those things had not happened, right? If Ashley's dad had just said, no, I'm not going to mention it, right? What a ripple effect that would have had. So you're affecting more than just the people that you're directly working with. All right. So like I said, a lot of us are comfortable with talking about this stuff, and a lot of us are kind of, in people's face with this message. But a lot of us are not. A lot of us just kind of like, we kind of keep things to ourselves, and we do that for a lot of reasons, and it's predominantly fear-based, right? So we're afraid that, like, hey, we're not supposed to talk about money, especially in the workplace. It's like politics and religion. You just don't talk about money. Politics and religion makes sense why you don't bring it up in the workplace, because it doesn't do anybody any good. Nobody's going to change their mind at work and be like, oh, okay, I'm going to change my voting preference now that you brought this up, right? And so it makes sense that you don't bring those up, because it doesn't do anybody any good. But money is one of those things where it's like, we all use money. We all need money. Like, why do we not talk about it? Why are we not more open about this? So there's kind of that taboo aspect. The other part, and this is, I think, is the more important one that affects us more, is that, we're afraid that, we'll sound like we're bragging about our situation, or that we're coming off as judgmental of the person that we're talking to situation. We're maybe not that we're coming off as that, but we'll think that we're coming off as that. And so we're just like, well, I'm just going to keep it to myself, right? And then this is a really big one. There's something called the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? Where, yeah, so you guys all know, right? So the more you know about a topic, the less confident you are about it, because you know that there's a lot that you don't know. Whereas the less you know about something, the more confident you tend to be. And that really affects us because, again, the people in this room are wicked smart, right? You guys know more than literally 99% of the population. And yet we say things like, well, I'm not a CFP, I'm not really trained. Like, I don't want to give bad advice or whatever. But, the reality is that, you may not have any certifications next to your name, but you really are qualified to help people with these basic things. Most importantly, the person that you're talking to, you certainly know more than that person about that topic, and you can really help them. The analogy that I like to use is, if you were walking through the parking lot, and you saw that somebody's air pressure on their tires was really low, it doesn't matter that you're not a car mechanic. Like, you can and should tell them, like, hey, this is really dangerous. You should inflate your tires. You don't have to have a certification. Okay. So let's talk about overcoming fear. Fear is one of those things I always thought, like, oh, maybe I'll just, figure out a way to not have fear. And that's just not reasonable. Fear, like, never goes away. I'm afraid right now that you guys won't like my presentation, right? But you work through it, right? And it never goes away. You just kind of find ways to work through it. So let's talk about that. How do we do that? So the first is understanding the importance of the message. Even if it's like an uncomfortable conversation or you feel a little bit awkward bringing it up, this stuff really is important. We've already talked about some of the ways that when we have these conversations, like what a monumental impact it can have on that person. And again, the ripple effect of the people that they talk to. So understanding, having that sense of mission where, the thing that you're talking about is important enough that it's worth it to have uncomfortable conversations. Any of you guys that are parents, right? You've had the talk with your kids. It was probably really uncomfortable, right? But that it's so important that, to make sure that they're being safe and everything like that, that it is worth it to have that uncomfortable conversation to deliver this really, really important message. This is kind of the same, but it's with money. Okay. You have to understand that, like, as you have more and more conversations, it actually gets easier, right? You figure out ways to introduce the topic into conversations. I did this job for a few months over the summer, and it was really uncomfortable to walk up to a group of people who were just kind of shooting the breeze with each other and interrupt their conversation to be like, hey, let's talk about money. But you find ways to do it, you do. You kind of make small talk a little bit and kind of, shift the conversation in there so that you're not like, the creepy sales guy or whatever. But as you have more conversations, you do get better at it. And it does make it easier. It makes it less uncomfortable. All right. And then this one's really important. I promise you that most of the people that you talk to actually will take action, even if they seem like they're not going to take action. It's not like it's, 10% of the people are going to listen to what you say. It's actually, most people are going to take action based on what you say. And a lot of them will come back to you afterwards, like that guy that reached out to me a year and a half later. And that will give you a lot of confidence, right? Knowing that you helped somebody and that they listened to you and that they appreciated your advice, that'll give you a lot of confidence to continue going and having these conversations. All right. So how to make an impact, right? The most important thing is, like we talked about, having conversations. Just talk with money about everybody that you run into, Another way is that, if you work with a company, if you're still working, right? If you work with a company and you have an HR department, like, talk to them about, putting on financial classics, the basics of 401ks, right? How many of you worked with people who didn't contribute enough to get the match on your 401k? And those people probably just don't know any better, right? They don't know why it's important. They don't even know what a 401k is. Talk to your HR about putting on those classes or hiring like a workplace money coach to come in and teach those classes. Or if they don't have it in the budget, volunteer to lead those classes yourself. Again, you guys know more than, most of the employees of the companies that you're working for, and you have a lot of value that you can deliver to them. And again, this is life-changing stuff. And then, you can utilize community venues. So this is something me and Ashley have been trying to figure out now that we have a lot of time on our hands. It's like, okay, where can we go that we can get large groups of people together to kind of, teach them these basics and deliver this message. So yeah, having conversations, if you're always talking about money, you're going to be that money go-to person. That's kind of what I was when I was in the Navy. Like, people would seek me out whenever they had financial questions. When people know that you're really passionate about this stuff and that you know what you're talking about, they'll actually just like seek you out, which is nice. The second point here, so I like this concept of just-in-time training. So if your company is about to give out a bonus, or you're about to get a cost of living adjustment, or somebody's getting promoted, or whatever the case is, talk to people when they're right at that kind of decision point and say, hey, I know you're about to get this, $5,000 bonus or whatever it is. If you took 2,000 of that and you just invested it or put it in your 401k or whatever, how much do you think that would turn into 30 years from now? And they're going to guess really wrong, low numbers. And you can kind of wow them with like compound interest, and that will motivate them to make changes. And again, if you can get to them before they have a chance to start spending the money, that's really helpful, because we all know once you start spending the money, like, you can't stop. It's really hard to cut back. But yeah, I really like the concept of just-in-time training. I did this with my mom. For years and years, I was kind of pushing her to open an IRA. She was very afraid of the stock market. It could go to zero, that type of thing. And finally, I was doing her taxes like I do each year. And I was like, Mom, if you open an IRA right now, you would actually get an extra $1,500 back on your federal tax return. Like, I showed her in TurboTax and the light turned green and showed her a bigger refund and stuff. That's what motivated her, to do that. And ever since then, she's maxed it out every year, which has been really nice. So anyway, yeah, utilize those opportunities when they're about to have like an immediate decision. And then, this last point, intrusive leadership. So this is kind of going back to that concept of like, most people are not going to come and ask you about these things. You really have to like give them the message anyway. It's sort of like unsolicited advice. It's very uncomfortable, but again, it's very impactful. So, talking about HR, we kind of talked about this, but, request that they, lead some financial literacy classes about the 401k plan or living on a budget or whatever the case is. And if they can't do that, like, offer to lead those classes. If your company has a company newsletter, like, we think that, oh, nobody reads these things, but people do. They do read those things. And maybe if you put in there like, hey, the effect of increasing your 401k by 1%, what would that do over time? That's a motivating thing for people. And if only one person takes action, that's huge, right? Yeah, and then utilizing community venues. So again, this is something me and Ashley are working on. Is like, okay, how do we put this information out into the community? So yeah, go to your local library. Say, hey, I'd love to put on a free class. The basics of investing, the basics of how taxes work. Whatever the case is. Go to your local HOA. Maybe they have like a gathering place where you can host meeting once a month, or after the HOA meeting, right afterwards, we're going to be talking about investing. Stuff like that. A local community center or rec center, school or college. If you guys know Mark Troutman, he actually teaches a high school personal finance course, right? And he's really, really smart with this stuff. So, he is changing lives, right? Imagine if all of us knew at 18 the stuff that we know now, like how much better off we'd be, right? And Mark is doing that, right? He's having that impact, right? Because he went to the school and said, hey, I'd love to teach this course. Yeah, and then some of you guys are, churchgoers. Church is a place where you kind of implicitly trust each other, right? That's a great place to go to the pastor and say, hey, I'd love to, after service or Sunday nights or whatever the case is, teach some of these classes and, help our church be a little bit better with money. Okay. So yeah, I'm going to leave this up. I don't know if we're going over time or not, but I'm going to leave this up and you guys can take a screenshot. If you're a person that's like, hey, I don't really want to create my own PowerPoints or curriculum or whatever, here's some organizations you can volunteer with. All of these deal with finance in a different way. They're not necessarily explicitly for teaching, personal finance basics or anything, but they get you in front of people around the topic of money where you can have those conversations. Again, I go back to my mom, we were doing her taxes, right? And that's a really good opportunity to be like, how you can save on taxes by investing, And some of these, for example, like this one, the personal financial counselor, that's what I do I say for a living, but it's, off and on. That's actually paid work. So if that's something you're interested in, like doing this in a part-time or full-time capacity, definitely come and talk to me. And I'll talk to you about, the company that you need to go through, the certifications that you need to do, and all the requirements, and what the job actually is day to day. I've had like probably 5 different people from the FI community, that I've referred to the company, so they can kind of get started and everything. So if that's something that you want to do and get paid for, definitely reach out to me, and I'll talk to you exactly about how that process works. Okay. Yeah. So that's it. I hope that this has given you guys a little bit of like maybe confidence and motivation to like go out and have these uncomfortable conversations, even when people are not asking you for advice. Yeah, that's it.